G'day, this is Harney from Digital Logic with you again for another episode of Under the Macro. Today's episode we're going to examine some products from iFootage, namely the S1A3 package or motorised motion control rig. This kit is comprised of the Shark slider, which has been around for nearly 2 years, which consists of the A1 S1 module, and this is basically what motorises the single axis slider. The new component is the pan and tilt head, which is called or referred to the X2 motion control. So when you assemble all these components together, you basically end up with an S1A3 motion control rig. And this is really what our focus is on today. So the first thing you do, this new module, the X2, comes in a similar case, a hard sort of Pelican style case with the battery, the V-lock component, everything you need basically to run the system. They've also expanded the shutter release cables, and there's a bunch of them here to cover more cameras like Panasonic, Samsung, and a bunch of other cameras as well. So yeah, again, for time-lapse photography. The first thing that you need to do is when you assemble this unit, I'm not going to go through it, it's fairly self-explanatory. It does come with a manual, a printed manual, and that manual does go through fairly simply with photographs showing you how to install those components. So we'll assume that you can do that quite easily, and we'll pick it up from there. So the first thing that you want to do is it has a 4 dip switch channel selector to synchronize the radio frequency. So it operates on a 2.4 gigahertz wireless frequency, and you can basically, you've got 4 channels that you can set. So on each unit you'll get the dip switch, and you basically just make sure they're the same. I don't know if you can see. It's underneath, okay. So it's underneath on this one, it's on the side on this bit, but basically, and on the remote controller, it's set up in the software. So let's start the wireless controller and check where you can set the settings basically for the channel, for the sync channel. So you can see the menu system come up, and that includes the manual, auto, record, the time-lapse menu, panorama, and then set. So the set is where the settings are, so we're going to go into that. And then if you scroll down, you can see here sync setting, and at the moment you can see all those things are toggled up, and you can basically go into these and set any sort of configuration, and as long as they match the actual hardware dip switches, then you're right to go and you're in sync. So I'll just go back out of that. We're back to the main menu. So once that's set up, you've basically got communication. I'm going to turn this on. And before I do that, I'm going to show you, when you install the X2, you get this little stopper, this rubber stopper. And this is required to put on this end so that the battery module, when it's connected to the X2 and it zeroes out its home position, that it doesn't come around and knock into this motor. If you put the stopper there, and this is against it all the way, you basically are guaranteed to clear the S1A1 motor. But if you don't have that on there, there is a potential that when it's zeroing out its home position, that it's going to knock that and make an awful sound. Okay, so once we've established our frequency on the sync settings, on the channels, and we've made them all the same, I'm going to turn the unit off, and I've turned the controller off. I've turned these things off, and then I'm going to basically slide this to the 0 position on the slider, and the pan tilt head should be plus or minus 30 degrees. Is what it says in the manual, so to give it an idea, so it can balance itself out and give itself a home position. So I'm going to put this, say, within that, so you can see the way it zeroes itself out. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to turn this on, and then I'm going to turn the controller on. And you'll notice on here it says Motion X2 is fine, go to default position, click OK. Going back, and it's basically now zeroed itself out, and this is basically the home position. So I've pushed it against here to set a 0, it's done the pan and tilt, it's all zeroed out, and then the next thing I'm going to do is basically tell it the maximum position. Because the Shark slider comes in 2 configurations, you can get it in the bundle where it's almost 1.2 meters long, and also the half that distance as well. I need to tell this unit that the maximum distance you've got to travel is up to this point, and basically we do that by going to the settings menu. So I'll move across to the settings menu, go into that, and you can see distance set. So I'm going to go into that distance set, and then I'm going to use the toggle to basically save as the endpoint. So if I grab that, that's not that one. Here we go. So I'm going to pick the endpoint where it's going to go to. Get as close as I can get it without hitting it. It's probably a good idea. There we go. I'm going to set it there. I'm going to click on this button, so 458 millimeters. It's now saved. So once I've set that, I can go back to the main menu. And in the main menu, I can click into here, and you can see the 0 with the little dash underneath. That's what you'll click on, which is this right button here. That'll send it back to its home position. So the first thing you're going to do after you've set your limits, we're going to go in and record a track. And you can record up to 9 different tracks. And those tracks that we record can be used later on for the automatic start and stop of a track, and also for the time-lapse feature. So if I go to record and go into there, I see that number 1 is selected, and you can select different ones. So let's go to 1. Currently there's something recorded in 1, but I'm just going to override that. So if I click into 1, and now I can go through, you can see the record button there, and I can hit record to initialize it. So I'll do that. And now it's recording, there's the time. So I can move this across, I can tilt up, I can rotate. Let me just stop it there. And now I can press stop again. And now that's recorded. It's got 14.1 seconds for track 1 that I've pre-recorded. So once I've recorded that track, I'm going to go across to auto and recall that track and play it. So I go into auto, click onto that. You can see number 1's selected by default. You can see it was 14 seconds that I just recorded earlier. This is where it's starting from 2.5 millimeters, going to that length along the slider, and this is the angles that it's covering, 0.9 degree to 60 out in the pan, and there's the tilt. So it's giving some of that information that's, minimum, maximum limits. And then we can go into there, select that track, and there's 3 options here. You can go play back from A to B and stop. You can go from A to B to A, and it will use the same amount of time that it took to go from A to B as to B to A. So our pre-recorded track 1 was about 14 seconds. So it will take nearly 28 seconds to go from A to B, back from B to A. And you've got track mode, which is probably the simplest mode, where it basically plays back the track that you recorded. So track 1, it took 14 seconds. It's going to play that mode. No fade in, fade out, or any of those other additional features or functions that you can do with the other modes. So if I go back to A, B to A, as you can see, I go into there, select it. 14.1 was the original time for the pre-recorded track that we just recorded. The fade in is a setting that you can adjust and basically give a fade in time. So it ramps in and ramps out. So if I do that over 2 seconds, I can do the same here on the fade out, and you'll see it'll basically slow down at the beginning and ends. 2 seconds, and now I can go next. I can go quick back to basically get this to the 0 point. Click on that, and it's going to go back to the beginning. And once it's got that, then I can select a single run or a circle run, which is a cyclic run. So basically you can say, run this now and go from start to end and stop, and there it is, and you'll have to return it back. Or you can do a cyclic run where you can it'll go from the start to end, go back and redo it again as a loop. So that sort of feature could be used well where you see similar to like the Red Rock Micro one-man crew, where you can do sort of a parallax sort of effect, where you can have it pointing at a subject, and you can start at A, finish at B, and it will just go back using the same time, A to B, and keep doing that. So if I run that single for now, you can see it's starting. We've got our fade in that we set up for 2 seconds, picking up the speed, and we had it at 14.1 seconds overall. And now there's sort of a fade out. There you go, there's the fade out. And we had it on ABA, and it's doing the reverse of that again. And you can also override this and stop it if you don't want to go to the end as well. You don't have to let it go to the end. And there you go. So that's now finished. Stop that. Now that was a single run. If I went to the next option, which is cycle or circle run, for cyclic, it's going to basically do exactly what we just saw, but kick off again and do it again. So I'll let it just show you how it's going to start that, and then I'll override it and stop it. You can also set the modes of flipping the direction of the sort of pan and tilt. So I'm standing behind it, and at the moment my direction of slide is opposite to what I naturally would be more comfortable with, but I can go into the settings and flip those as well. So that's the first run, and now it's going to do it again. So you could leave this running, for hours, and it would just continually do this. And whilst it's doing that, it's got a microprocessor inside, so you can actually turn this off. You don't need, this is giving you feedback of what's happening. But if I show you this now and I actually turn this off, you'll see that this thing will keep operating. So you can conserve power in this. If you've set it up and you're letting it run, you don't need to leave this on. So I'll turn it back on and it will just pick up that feedback. Communications are still running. It'll pick it up and there's the feedback. So I can click on that stop, and I've just stopped it and overridden that cyclic routine. I can go back into auto here, back to where we were. We've done the AB, ABA, and track mode is set to use the simplest of that, where just you've got a runtime. You can click on that, click on the quick back to get it back to the beginning, and then you can just run that. So single run, same as before. I'm going to stop that. Go back. There you go. So I'll go back to the main menu. And so we've gone through the order. So we've gone through recording a track, and you can do up to 9. You can then go to auto and play those back. You can also do the manual mode we talked about, where you can basically, these little joysticks, set the speed, and the speed's variable. So if I move these toggle slowly, it's slow, and the more I push down on, the quicker it takes off. Or if you want to set a constant speed, you can turn this dial, and you'll see that icon just changed, and that icon means it's a constant now. So if you turn that dial 2 millimeters per second, 3, 4, 5, and then you move that dial, it's consistently. So if you haven't got a steady finger and you can't get a consistent rate, you can set that, predefine the speed, and that's what it will do for you. Or you can turn it back and it will go to variable. It shows a little icon of a joystick, and you can control the speed and rate. So you got the X for the position of the slider, and then you can arrow down and go through the pan and tilt, and that's a degrees. And similarly there, you can set a speed angle as well. If you're not comfortable with the position of the pan and tilt, you can set a constant degree, and it will then set that as a constant. So fairly straightforward there. So I'll set that back to variable. I'll go back to the main menu. Okay, so we're going to go into the panorama mode, which is a new feature in the kit. So basically how this system works, once you set, or you tell it the camera type using in the frame size, you can go through and mark a point in the lower left-hand corner of the frame, and then mark a point in the top right-hand corner, and it will then take the rest of the pictures to fill up that image. So you end up with basically an extremely high resolution image. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the frame set. If I click onto there, automatic set is already predefined some camera frames, and you'll see what I mean when I go in there. You've basically got full frame camera, you've got micro four thirds, APS-C. So you can basically pick the camera that applies, and it automatically knows the frame setting. Once you've got that, you can go through and pick a start point. So I'm going to select his start point, and you basically move the frame to where you want it. So let me just say I go there and start it there, and then save that as a starting point. And this gives you the angles that it does. Then I'm going to go to the end point. Now you've got quick set and manually set. So what quick set does, allows you to basically pick some angles, and it's going to offset from this starting point. I'll go in there and show you the menus, what it looks like. Actually, I'll move this camera out of the way. Let me go back because I'm just covered the camera. So let me move this out of the way to here. How about that? Okay, let me go back. So I go to panorama. We're going to go back to the end point. So the angle of the camera is still where it is. We're going to set the end point. If I go into there, quick set, and select on that, you can basically set these angle presets. So you can say, from where I am now, offset the pan and tilt by these degrees, 90, and you can basically scroll up through these 60, 100 degrees, whatever it is, and that's what it will do, and then it will set it and start from that point. Or you can go back, and what we're going to do is the manually set. I'll scroll down, go manually set, and very similar to the way we set the start point, I can go through and basically pick up an angle using the joysticks, the pan and tilt. So I can say I want to end up here somewhere, and I want to be looking up here, and I can set that as a mark. There I am. Now I've set my beginning point down here, and I've set my upper point down there, and this camera is going to go, well, the system's going to go through and basically take photos to fill up that whole image. So I'll go down to the start. Let's start that. So it's going back to the starting position. And you can see it took the first shot. It's moving up. And it will basically go through and take a sequence of photographs up and then go down and basically fill all that frame up. And it knows the amount of images it needs to fill up that frame. I'll let that go. You can see now it's doing the next row, or next column, I should say. So it's basically went up, it went across, now it's coming down. And it'll go across and then go up. So I'm not going to let that finish, but you can see it's not too hard to figure out how you can creatively use that sort of thing for high resolution acquisition of images. So I'll stop that. You can stop at any time. Pause it there. I'm going to cancel that. Stop. There you go. So that's the panoramic feature. It's quite easy. As we said, you can basically set the frame setting and then set the start and end point. And there's a couple of options using automatic or manual. You can also have a feature to set the exposure for each setting. So the exposure and hold time, you also have some control around that. So I think a lot of these things are going to need some experimentation to get the sort of look and feel that you want. So the final thing we're going to go through is the time-lapse mode, which has a fair few options in there, including stop motion. Let me go back to manual and just move this out of the way. Okay. Okay. So if I go back to time-lapse now, and in time-lapse you can see you've got these three modes. So you've got number mode, time mode, and shutter mode. So number mode is using the pre-recorded tracks that we did earlier. We talked about having track, up from 1 to 9 pre-recorded tracks. So this number mode allows you to retrieve one of those recorded tracks and then apply that track to a time-lapse sequence. So if we go in there and use that first one that we did, so you can see there number 1, 14 seconds, and let's say I want to use that as a starting point. So you select that, and now you say, okay, well, how many frames do I want to take? How many pictures? So at the moment it's set to 20 pictures, the exposure, the interval, and you can see at 2 seconds, 20 pictures, it's saying it's going to be 40 seconds to run. So go into there, you got number of photographs you can take for a fade in, number of photographs for a fade out. The preview frame we're saying is 24 frames a second that it's set for. And you can see some other options here. This shoot, move, shoot. So this is basically if you're using a long shutter or long exposure and you don't want to get streaks in the image, you basically use shoot, move, shoot. So it will know, it will say, it will only take the photo and have the shutter open when it's not moving, and then it will move to the next frame and then take the next shot. So this, again, it's a bit of experimentation to see the sort of look you want. Do you want those streaked sort of images, or you want really clean shots, depending on the look you want. And so I think some experimentation is required and get familiar with the look you're going to get. Continuous, again, this is where you'll get the streak. So it will just take the photo that it needs to take based on that time sequence, and if the shutter's open while it's moving, so be it, and you'll get that streak. Stop motion is a function where you control the rate that it takes the photo. So you can take the photo by pressing the button here, move the objects that you're shooting, and then come back and take it, and it will move to the next frame. So using the same track, but now you control the trigger to then move on to the next frame. Shoot, move, shoot, similarly as the first one, where it allows you to take the photo, but it's not going to move and streak the photo whilst it's moving. So you still control the shot, but it's going to take the photo, move with the shutter closed, and then you can trigger it again. So we'll go back out there. So let's just say we're going to do shoot, move, shoot. There you go, it's taken one. So this is allowing the shutter to take the final shot before it moves. Now if I stop this, I go over the stop and I press stop, and I'm going to go back and show you the continuous one. So if I go continuous, it's going to go back to the beginning, and you should see that you see continually moving there. It's not stopping and taking the photo. So this is where you'll start to get some streaks depending on the exposure time. Stop that. So now we're going to go into stop motion mode. Select that, and it's going to go back to the beginning, and you can see here it's got shoot, it's got a picture of a camera, and it's got 0p, so no photographs are taken. Now I can press this button on the shoot and it will take a photo. And now I can go in front of the object, move it around, come back here, take another shot. Now it waits for me. I can go at the front of it again, move the object again, press it again. And that's essentially the stop motion method of doing it. I can go through and quit that. So that's stop motion quite simply. The last one is shoot, move, shoot. And basically you see the icon there is a bit of a loop. And basically it's almost like the shoot, move, shoot previously, but it's when it gets to the end, it's going to go back and do it again to get multiple passes. So if I select that now, it's going to go back to the beginning, and it's going to start that process of shooting, moving, shooting, and it will do it all the way, that 14 seconds that we did in pre-recorded track 1. Once it gets to the end, it's going to stop, and it's going to go all the way back to the beginning really quickly, and then start the process again, so you can basically get multiple passes of the same recorded track. So I'll show you that going to the end. It's almost there. You can also, with these pre-recorded tracks, again, depending on the number of photographs you take, that'll extend the time, obviously, of that track. So initially a track was 14 seconds, but if you have a lot more photographs with a lot more interval time, you can extend that. So you can see that's just returned to the beginning, and it's re-looping that track again. So I'll stop that, you get the picture for that one. So one final thing I'm going to mention around the time lapse. Time lapse can be at times confusing, because generally you're thinking about screen time, how long do I need to set the run to achieve a particular run of a time lapse. So one feature this thing does have, it does actually assist you in trying to achieve that. So if I go to number mode, which we talked about the pre-recorded track, and select that, we had our 14-second, the first thing we did with that pre-record. I select that. I can basically set, well, how many photos do I want to take? And let's just say I select 25 from here. So if I go 25 pictures, the minimum is 2-second interval time. It's saying, based on that, 25 times 2 is going to give me 50 seconds. That's how long it's going to take to do this time lapse in real time. Then down the bottom here, there's this, you tell it the frames a second that you're outputting to, what your final video is going to be, and it's telling you preview is 1 second. So you're basically getting 1 second of actual screen time. So for example, if I go back up and make that 50 pictures, you'll get 2 seconds. So let me go up and make that 50. And I suppose the reason why I'm pointing this out, because this can actually assist you in the field to work out on the go, you know, what settings you punch into here to achieve those preview time outputs. So I've got 50 photos, 2-second interval. It's going to take 1 minute and 40 to run it. And you can see the screen time, the preview is 2 seconds. That's the output, which makes sense. 50 frames a second, you've got 50 frames, that's 2 seconds of screen time. So that's quite handy. And also when you start adding, you know, fade in and fade out, all these things help you contribute to seeing what the preview, what the output is going to be. So they've really thought about some of these real practical tips or assistance in the field to achieve the time lapse you require. So if I go back out of there, we covered the number mode, which is again recalling the pre-recorded track. Time mode is where you can set the time. So if I go into that mode, initially we did the pre-recorded track by default was 14 seconds, but I can go into there and now I can set a time. So I can go into here, and if you can see 1 hour, you can see at 40 seconds initially 20 pictures. If I made that 1 hour, Now it needs 1820 pictures. So again, it's now you defining the time, and it will do the rest. It will fill in. Okay, you want it to run for an hour. You're going to need 1820 pictures to run that for an hour of time lapse. So I'll go back out of that, and then the shutter mode. So the shutter mode allows you to pick the number of photographs you want to take and purely base it on that. So if I go click through this, as you can see, the time that it's taking. So if I go 25 pictures, it's going to take 25 seconds. But if I increase the interval, it doubles. If I increase the exposure, again, that affects it. So again, it's giving you different variables or different levers to adjust to give you different effects at the end of the day. So they're the three options available. And again, a lot of these things I think are going to be a bit of trial and error experimentation, just so you can see the sort of results you can achieve with different settings. So I think that covers the majority of the functions. Surprisingly, I think once you get this in your hands for a day, it won't take long before you understand the user interface, and once you're there, you can start experimenting and really get some really nice artistic results based on the different parameters set up in the unit. So I hope this video has been educational and some great insights around this product. If anyone's experienced or seeing the original Shark slider, you know, they won't let you down with the quality. The quality is just really up there in terms of the finish. They've created this quick release here for these carbon fiber rods, again, to help you assist in finding the nodal point to get really nice, precise nodal accuracy in the different axes. They've also provided this quick release plate, so it allows you to undock this, put it on a tripod. You can put it on a jib as well. So it is a fairly versatile and modular system which can really expand the creative possibilities in your final products. So thank you for watching. It's Harney from Digital Logic. If you're interested in the product or learning more about it, visit our website or come in and see us in person. We have one of these in rentals, and we have some demos, and we have them for sales as well. Thank you for your time. See you next time.